He was. He was.
Supervisors, please take your seats. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call of supervisors, please. Oh, 1 second here. All right, let's try it now. One more. There we go. 28 supervisors in attendance. I'm going to ask, albeit somewhat late, if we would all stand for a moment of silence and recognition for those victims in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, who lost their lives a little over a week ago. Thank you. And our continued thoughts and prayers go out to Congresswoman Giffords in her recovery, and that she continue on the road that she has been on. We wish her the best and her family the best. I'd also like, on a little bit more positive note, to recognize a Town of Summers resident, Mr. Reince Priebus, who was recently elected to a very prominent position within the Republican National Party. It doesn't matter to me your slant. I think it is fantastic when we can have someone from the state of Wisconsin, specifically from Kenosha County, more specifically for me from the town of Summers, elected to a position such as that. So congratulations to Mr. Priebus. I trust that he will do well. A heck of a task in front of him. If you would please, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. I meant to do the moment of silence that I kept going. Citizen comments. Any citizen wishing to address the board, please approach a microphone. State your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Louis Fergani, 4526 29th Avenue, City of Kenosha. I wanted to continue on what I was saying the last meeting and also the Legislative Committee about the situation that I've uncovered regarding Western Kenosha County Transit. I've got some more information. But I'll just review it as to what I said and correct myself. I said 6 county communities had decided that they would not want to pay any taxes, new taxes for any transit. And it was amusing, and it's still amusing, that they decided to include all of Kenosha County. So outside of the usual question is, what else don't they want the city of Kenosha to spend its money on? I will just say, well, perhaps we should agree with them and not give them any, especially when it's funded by city of Kenosha taxpayers through their property taxes that go into the general county fund. I found out that Western Kenosha County Transit gets $34,855 a year in deficit funding from the county general funds, a lot of which is paid for by the city of Kenosha. In other words, we're paying for transit for people who don't want to pay for their own, and judge that by a transit referendum. And not only that, but the town of Paris, I guess I'd forgotten about this, didn't even bother with a referendum. They said, no, we'll just vote against it anyway with the town board resolution, and they did that. Their resolution, no new taxes to support transit or rail services. There's a difference, such as a sales tax or local vehicle registration fee in any part of Kenosha County. Ostensibly, if the city of Kenosha wanted a wheel tax, Paris would come out against it. Yeah, right. But that's the way they worded it. All kidding aside, I found out that the Western Kenosha County Transit, I guess I'd known this, takes people from Kenosha County to a Walmart, the end of the line in Walworth County. Did you know that? We're transporting Kenosha County dollars to Walmart in Walworth County. And I know, well, I don't know, I guess, but I'd bet the farm that Walworth County or Walmart is not paying a penny to that service. I know. We're also going to Antioch, with Western Kenosha County Transit Services through communities that don't want to pay for transit. I said 6. I spoke too soon. It was 7 who voted for it. Let's see, I've got them: Paddock Lake, Twin Lakes, Randall, Bristol, Silver Lake, Salem, and Wheatland. So it's actually 7, plus Paris didn't even bother with a referendum. Before I continue, once again, let me thank you all for not giving this half-baked referendum not only a second, but not even a second thought since then. So I say, before we do anything else, let's immediately stop transit services to Walworth County before we do anything else, and examine how we can redistrict this, reroute, I should say, this Western Kenosha County Transit, which is a good idea, but only to communities who want it. If they don't want it, who are we to argue? Let's just reroute it. We can still go through it on public roads to communities that do want it with the doors closed. Let the citizens who see the bus whiz by ask their local representatives, county representatives, why is that bus going by my house when it used to stop? And the answer, of course, is, how did you vote in the referendum? I'll be back, but other communities they traverse and serve are some of the very communities that didn't want it in the referendum. Silver Lake Village Hall. We have Twin Lakes, 10 Oaks Apartments. All viable places that need transit and should have them, serving elderly, handicapped, people who can't drive, people who shouldn't drive. But if they don't want to pay for it, would you, anybody who lives in Kenosha, in the city of Kenosha, justify spending $34,855 of county money to go places that people don't want to go, to businesses that won't help pay their share of it? I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Rugani. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Any other citizen comments? Seeing no other comments, citizens' comments are closed. I will now return to announcements of the chairman. Got out a little ahead of myself. We had a couple of issues with voting units last week. Both have been repaired. I want to make sure everyone is diligent about keeping the area under their desk clean. We had some pinched wires. I know we've got quite a few books stacked under quite a few desks, so we should, I'm not naming any names, Supervisor Elverman. I'm just pointing out the fact that we should all be diligent. Yes, they did. So in any event, let's make sure we pay attention to this system and try to limp it along as long as we can. I have on my desk, and I was somewhat concerned by a letter that was attached to it, said Chairman Molinaro and Supervisor, County Board Supervisor. So I was nervous that we made 28 copies of this. This is the Regional Water Supply Plan for Southeastern Wisconsin, Volume 1 and 2. It is available. I'll read it tonight, so anyone who wants it tomorrow, it's yours. I trust that there is a copy in the Planning and Development Office. I'll have a copy here. Supervisor Bruning has something I'll go ahead and allow her to add if she would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If anyone would like a copy on a CD, they can also request that.
Perfect. And I may have said that in the letter. I have not read it. It was on my desk tonight. So that's available if you'd like it. Committee Chair, we had a meeting last night of the chairman of the various committees on the county board. I want to give you just a couple of quick updates. If you recall, the budget resolution that was passed for 2011 had 2 initiatives in it. One was to review and analyze the various programs that are provided through the Human Services Department. Chairman Rose of the Human Service Committee has started that process and is looking at it. We talked briefly today. I will get a little bit better update from him in the coming weeks. It has been on his agenda, I believe, at least the last meeting, if not the last 2, and it is on the upcoming meeting, so they will continue down that road. There will be some assistance from the administration, and I anticipate that when necessary, the Finance Committee will be brought in if it's required as well. Second component or directive that was part of the budget resolution was the yeah, where the heck is it? I've got my notes here. The compensation for all county employees, taking a look at not only salaries, but taking a look at benefits, the entire package. That, if you recall, that was a direction that came out of Supervisor Noble's request to take a look specifically at the flex account. The conversation turned to looking at all compensation, the full package for all county employees. The discussion last night, there will be joint meetings between administration and finance. The intention there is to bring in our outside negotiating counsel that we have brought into Kenosha County here as of this budget to assist in some of those discussions. We will talk with our advisor relative to health insurance, and we will bring back to this county board an advisory resolution for what is going to be the upcoming negotiation sessions with what I think are 4 unions that are currently labor organizations that are going to be up starting in June. Those discussions, I believe, will start in June. So the intent is to bring an advisory resolution back to this county board. For point of reference, it's something that we have tried over the years to do, not only through the administration committee. We've had committee of the whole meetings on the county board floor where we discussed and provided input on behalf of the county board, direction to where we would like to see relative to our budget, where we thought county government should be, where we thought the number should be. I think collectively we're not quite convinced that that has always been taken to heart, always been heard. So we're going to do what we have started doing a little bit more in the past, specifically with the budget resolution, advisory resolution. We're going to bring an advisory resolution forward with regard to where we'd like to see these negotiations go. So your input will be sought. It will be joint committees, committee meetings, and they'll certainly be on the agenda. Another topic that was discussed briefly last night, brought up again tonight by Chairman Clark in the joint committee with the legislative and finance, primarily talking about the redistricting and the county board reduction resolution that is currently out there, is looking to understand what a reorganization of the county board would do should the numbers be reduced, but also what and how that may play into our current structure of the county board. So we will be talking about that a little bit further. Is there some economies to looking at, and if you go back and take a look at the reports that Frank, Corporation Counsel's office put together, I sent that link, Mary sent that link to clerk a couple of weeks ago, that addresses back in 2006 the sizing of the county board, restructuring the county, redistricting of the county board. Also talked about size of the county board, the potential for combining committees, pros and cons of all of that. Go back and take a look at those reports if you haven't. I'm going to urge all of us to make sure we do it. There's a great deal of good information in there, and it is once again time to look at all of that. There is some good conversation to be had. I think there's some potential for some streamlining of county government, some potential to give the county board a little bit more of the legislative authority that I believe we should have, and maybe over the years come a little bit too complacent for us. On the agenda, you'll see here County Board Technology Committee appointments. I have heard from a number of people. I have talked to all of them, and this evening it's my intention to appoint Supervisor Hallman as chairman of that committee, Supervisor Gail Gens as vice chairman of the committee, Supervisor Boyd Frederick, Supervisor Mike Underhill, Supervisor John Grulick, all as county board representatives on that committee. We will have the county clerk, who has agreed to participate. She's been on point with that task for quite a long time. We continue to sit with what we have, what we operate with in terms of our system here in the county board chambers, but certainly the county clerk has a great deal of information to share with the committee. And Mr. Carl Samuelson, which is with the Kenosha County IT department. So that's a 7-member committee. I would ask Supervisor Hallman to get in touch with me. We can talk about, or certainly Supervisor Gail Gens as well. Let's talk about how we structure that. What I'd like to see from a reporting standpoint, there is the oversight committee that oversees the IT department currently. I think there needs to be some involvement there. Clearly, I'd like something brought forward in a timely manner so that if there's going to be a budget impact, we understand what that is and it's able to be fit within the budget as quickly as possible. So those appointments will stand as of this evening. My intention is to have the committee in place only as long as necessary to get a recommendation to the administration to be included within the budget. And the only other thing I have is I have listened somewhat intently, overheard a few conversations. I'm getting a pretty good sense on who the Packer fans are in the room. And come next meeting, there could be some issues. So it's true that I'm a Bear fan, and go Chicago. And I see we have a couple in the back of the room. Supervisor reports. Anyone wishing to address the board? That's out of order. Supervisor comments. Supervisor Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a response to an article that was in the paper this week regarding the bus transit out to the Lakeview Corporate Center. When I saw in the paper where Mr. Polikoff had to, or alluded to the fact that it was the fault of Sewer PAC for not getting the study done. So I just want to give everyone a quick update on what's going on with that. This is what's happened so far. At the request of the City of Kenosha and Kenosha County, the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission is preparing a short-range, 5-year transit plan. The plan is intended to be an advisory guide to be considered for implementation in the City of Kenosha and Western Kenosha County transit systems. The planning study includes the analysis of the land use, population, and employment in the City of Kenosha and Kenosha County and the need for transit service. It's a route-by-route performance evaluation of the 2 transit systems, including comparison to peer transit systems in the state and nation, and the identification, evaluation, and recommendation of potential changes to the city and county transit system with respect to type, routes, and schedules of service. The next meeting of the advisory committee will be held in the first or second week of February and will include consideration of a performance evaluation of the Western Kenosha County transit system, and identification and discussion of a list of potential changes to the City of Kenosha and Kenosha County transit systems. Remaining steps in the completion of the study include advisory committee evaluation and prioritization of those changes and improvements to the transit systems, recommendation of preliminary and final plans, and consideration and recommendation of means of funding final plan implementation. The issue of the City of Kenosha transit system providing transit service within the village of Pleasant Prairie and the way in which that transit service is funded has brought attention to the transit service that is provided in Kenosha County, how that service is being provided and funded, and the transit study being conducted for the City of Kenosha and Kenosha County. Regarding the study underway, the Commission will work with Kenosha County, the City of Kenosha, the Village of Pleasant Prairie, and the Study Advisory Committee to complete the study and transit plan within the next 5 months, with a preliminary plan to be completed within the next 2 months. If requested by the Village of Pleasant Prairie and the City of Kenosha, the Commission staff will accelerate the analysis of potential changes which should be considered in routes extending from the City of Kenosha transit system to the Village of Pleasant Prairie, so that this element of the plan could be completed within 1 month. These are presently 2 routes which extend from the City of Kenosha into the Village of Pleasant Prairie. Work completed on the plan to date has identified Route 35 as one of the most productive routes in the City of Kenosha transit system, and Route 31 as one of the least productive routes. Lastly, regarding how to pay for transit service extended by the City of Kenosha to the Village of Pleasant Prairie, charging the full local share of the cost of extending transit service to the community within which the service extension is located is the typical way that this is addressed by transit systems and local governments. There are some exceptions where the businesses served by the service extension have also contributed to pay the local share, or where the transit system extending the service has contributed. If the transit service is a new route, Federal Highway Administration congestion mitigation and air quality funds may be used to fund the local share for the first 3 years. There are other alternatives for addressing the provision and funding of transit service across multiple municipalities. However, these alternatives to date have been rejected in southeastern Wisconsin. I would also like to point out that as everyone is doing their budgets, the Regional Planning Commission also has a budget that they have to follow, and they have never charged extra for trying to get this plan done when the city keeps changing their mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening I wanted to share with the group. I had an opportunity last week to meet with some people from what is called a SHARE program. The SHARE food program is something that is a nonprofit organization that helps families save like 30 to 50% on supermarket quality food. And I am going to start a share food program in the 10th District. We currently have one at Second Baptist Church, but we want to grow the program. And so what I wanted to do is let everybody know that in these economical times, I felt like it was a necessary thing to bring the share food program to the 10th District to help these families that may be struggling with getting groceries and getting food for their families. There is a website, www.sharewi.org. I encourage all supervisors to talk to the aldermen in their district to get these programs. We do have people, constituents out there that are struggling to make the ends meet, to feed their families, and I wanted to offer this program in my district to the people as a means, as an outlet to them, so that they were able to get food and things for their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Elverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From Highway and Parks, highways, just briefly, we've been blessed with a fairly mild winter. The Highway Department has been able to keep up with things very well this season, and unlike previous years, our salt supply looks very good. According to Mr. Sipsman, we're in good shape for the winter. No further purchases needed. Under parks, naturally all the parks are open. The sledding courses that we have and the dog parks. One of the big things we're doing this winter is the further development and on the opening of the Highway KD Park, which will be open at a minimal basis as far as the hiking trails. I report on that for next spring, and the possibility of fishing there. We've planning and development has mapped the trails with GPS. We have new trail maps color coded with the trails for spring, and we have one of the biggest things that we had to address was marking these trails. If you've ever been on some of the state trails, the Federal Ice Age Trail, you have mappings and guides for people to travel these. We have an Eagle Scout planning to make and install these trailhead signs as this Eagle Scout project. He's working on that this winter. And he also plans to build houses and put in a Bluebird Trail. But I told him the Bluebird Trail wasn't as important as getting the trail markers. We've got an application submitted for a fish farm license for the lake. That's another thing that we're going to have to address so that we can do our own stocking. And we are investigating other options on managing the fishing of the lake. It's a 33-acre lake, 60 feet deep, stocked basically on its own. Right now, the two open houses that we've had have produced numerous fish, but we do know once we open that up to the public, we're going to have to be working with the state and with a stocking procedure. On golf, we will not know until March our audit on how the season went for golf. They had a very good fall. As far as where we stand going into next spring financially, we're set to do the Milwaukee Golf Show on the 5th and 6th of March, and also planning a celebration this summer for the 75th anniversary of Petrifying Springs Golf Course. So those are some of the things with highway, parks, and golf. The staff is, again, working every day to prepare for spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Elverman. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would just request that we could have facilities before the next meeting come in and deal with this air conditioner, heater, whatever it is. It's making a lot of noise, and I can hardly hear what you're saying. So,
I'll look at it.
Previously, I reported that we have several retirees that have had their retirement benefits adjusted due to the way that payments were being calculated for retirement into their retirement accounts. There have been some claims, or a claim at this point could be additional claims that have been filed with the at this point in time. And Kenosha County has retained an attorney to address these claims. The Corporation Counsel did not feel that he could address these claims due to potential conflict of interest. And so we've retained outside counsel. I'm sure several of us have received emails from individuals, and I would just, we've established in closed session Finance Committee that if there is any questions that you may have as a result of these inquiries, that Dave Geertsen is going to be our point of contact, and he will be the one that is communicating with our attorney. As the finance chair, I certainly will be made aware of what's going on and report to you. Certainly we all have duties as county board supervisors to represent our constituents. We also have a fiduciary responsibility to Kenosha County, and I would just urge caution as you deal with these inquiries in this regard. On your desk, or maybe it was in your packet, there's a report as to where we anticipate our reserves ending up for 2010. We started the year at 6.2 million, and we're going to end up the year at about 6.2 million, with about a $15,000 decrease. Again, these are preliminary numbers. The change from the the significant change from the last report, when I reported this, I think we were at about 6.6 million, had to do with the uncontrollable to the county, and that is property tax delinquencies have come in higher than what we projected. So that's on your desk. I will continue to report on our reserves as we move forward. Also in your packet, or it may have been on your desk, there was another analysis done by the administration relative to property taxes by municipality. Why did they go up more in some and less in others? It's his color charts there, and it breaks it down as how much of the change was due to the tax levy, how much of the change was due to new construction. You'll see the new construction is a negative, because as we have new construction, if we have a 3% levy and we have 2% new construction, the feel to the taxpayer generally should be 1%. And then the blue category is change in valuation. So if you take for instance, a look at the city of Kenosha, they went up maybe appears to be about 4.5% roughly. I'm sorry, 5.5%. I'm not even going to try to do that. If you have any questions, talk to Dave Geertsen. But it was very helpful to look at it in that light as well. I know last time I threw a lot of numbers out there. And the last thing, at the last meeting, there's certainly citizen comments that relative to city services, county services, various different things. And one of the things that I just took a brief look at was, and this is kind of the story from 8 years ago, Tax Equity 1, Tax Equity 2, remember those studies? I just find it interesting that the city of Kenosha, as we're talking about this, has 60% of the population roughly, while they have 44% of the county levy. In Pleasant Prairie, they have roughly 17% of the taxes that they pay, while their population base is 11%. So we can't get into city, county. We got to look at what's best for the entire community, and we could look at every single department and find tax inequity. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Ron Johnson.
Thank you. On your desk, you should have a nomination form for the Youth and Governance Program. And if you know somebody that would like to be a part of that program, you can fill out this nomination form and return it to UW Extension Office, or bring it to me at the next county board meeting. I'll make sure it gets there. The deadline for the forms is February 11th. If you need more forms, I have those also. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to report that Kenosha County made the front page of the New York Times today. It appears that the New York Times has designated Highway 50 as the Packer Bear 50-yard line. And I'm serious. We did make the front page. But, we've always had, in fact, tonight, we had a citizen talk about the I-94 dividing line. Well, now we have a new northwest dividing line to worry about. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Singer.
For the record, my district straddles both sides of the Highway 50, but I am on the north side, so I am a Packer fan.
Whoops, I missed you on my list. I'll add that. Thank you. Any other supervisor comments? Seeing none, old business.
Ordinance 17 from Highway and Parks to create an ordinance on traffic controls at the intersection of County Trunk Highway Z, East Main Street, and County Trunk Highway O, Lance Drive, and County Trunk Highway OZ, West Main Street, and Polly Avenue in the Village of Twin Lakes. Submitted by Highway and Parks Committee. Alverman, yes. Noble, yes. O'Day, yes. Gale Gens, yes. Underhill, excused.
Supervisor Elverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move ordinance 17.
Ordinance 17 moved by Supervisor Elverman, seconded by Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Elverman.
Mr. Chairman, this summer, the Main Street in Twin Lakes had a total redo. You might say it was closed for the summer with a couple bypasses, and what happened in the village is that the police department and the village fathers there were very pleased with some of the temporary stop signs they put in. What this does is make 2 of those permanent, and since it is a county trunk highway that goes through, which is East Main Street, it's up to us to okay that. It's the request of the village board and the police department, rescue squads in the village of Twin Lakes that we do. I would urge your approval.
Anyone on ordinance 17? Not seeing any lights. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ordinance carries.
Resolution 93 from Finance Committee, a resolution to approve contract between Kenosha County and the Kenosha Area Business Alliance for High Impact Economic Development Fund. Finance Committee Clark, yes. O'Day, yes. Jeff Gens, yes. Singer, yes. Eckert is yes.
Supervisor Clark.
I move Resolution 93.
Resolution 93 moved by Clark, seconded by Supervisor O'Day. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many of you recall, Kenosha County once upon a time set $1 million aside to assist Chrysler in hopefully helping them do an electrical project at their plant. Obviously, that money was no longer needed for that purpose. Chairman Molinaro has championed this cause of reprogramming this money to give us another tool in our ability to attract new businesses or help our existing businesses create jobs through investment or through additional employees. So what this resolution is doing is in our budget, when we did our budget last year, we set the money aside for the county board to enter into a contract and have the oversight in how we're to use this money to enter into that contract with CABA. This $1 million is a one-time amount of money with the stated intent that we should not look at this as a one-time deal. While it may not be $1 million every single year, we're going to take a look at the effectiveness of this program and consider, through our normal budget process, consider funding it. In the document, it defines what, in order to be high impact, that it needs to at least create 50 new full-time equivalent positions. It sets certain dollar parameters for that, or it requires a capital investment of at least $3 million. I'm not sure whether it was on your desk or in the packet, but there was a change in committee, and it was in the exhibit, and it was on the Exhibit 1, the second page of Exhibit 1, where it talked about evaluation and reporting. And we changed it that it's, I'm just going to kind of read through this. The following performance measures will be considered, and we added and reported to the county: direct jobs, direct payroll, total new capital investment, total jobs, total payroll, and additional economic development, support leverage from other sources. And then it goes on, and here's what we added additionally. CABA will work with the Finance Committee towards the development of a reporting matrix that captures additional demographic information on the jobs that result, to the extent this information can be reasonably obtained from the participating companies. So I'm going to ask, without objection from the chair, if Mr. Battle from CABA can at least step to the podium and perhaps talk about how he sees this money helping Kenosha County create jobs, or why this is important.
Assuming there's no objection, Mr. Battle.
Thank you, Chairman Molinaro and County Board Supervisors. Todd Battle, the Kenosha Area Business Alliance. I think the Chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Clark, gave a good overview of the kind of the origin of this program. Monies were set aside to assist Chrysler in the retention of the engine plant. Ultimately, that did not happen. The money basically had been banked and was set aside for that project. We talked with county leadership about a concept that we'd seen work in a few other communities. There's a new program similar to this being formed in Washington County, north of Milwaukee, and we think the concept has a ton of merit. Essentially, what it would do is the $1 million, which is a one-time allocation, and we fully understand that, it would give us another economic development tool or resource in our toolbox. Today, we manage roughly $27 million worth of revolving loan fund programs. Those programs have been a very effective tool for Kenosha County and the surrounding area throughout its history to help companies grow, expand, invest in the area. The primary deal structure, they are exclusively used as debt funds. We make loans to companies, they get paid back with principal and interest. We loan the money out again. It's been a very effective tool. We see this tool as bolting on right next to the revolving loan fund programs and being perhaps a more creative, more aggressive incentive program that we could use with a little more flexibility. In terms of thought process, we could see the structure being used to craft forgivable loans, workforce training grants, help fund relocation assistance, and similar types of things that we're not able to do now with the revolving loan fund. So I guess we look at these and view this as one more arrow in the quiver, so to speak, when we're competing for economic development projects. This is a tool or a resource we don't currently have. It gives us a competitive edge. We've talked about the aims and the target of this program. We've labeled it a high-impact program, the thought being there's got to be a minimum threshold for a project to qualify for this. This is not intended to be for every run-of-the-mill project. We do have revolving loan fund programs. We do have other resources. This would be for a company or an expansion or a new project that meets a certain threshold. We've set that threshold initially at $3 million of capital investment or 50 new jobs. I think the sentiment is let's get this program up and running. Let's get out on the street. Let's put it to work. Let's see if it can be a catalyst, and let's measure, report, and review the results. And if successful and functional and a great program, we would anticipate coming back to the county at some point in the future and reporting those results and seeing what we could do from there. If not successful or if needs tweaking, tweak the program, revise it, refine it, make it work. But we see this as a really advantageous tool to have for us as we're out competing for economic development projects. The last thing I'll talk about, Chairman Clark talked about the reporting requirements. There are certain things we want to report and measure with respect to, how many jobs does this help create, what kind of wages are associated with those jobs, what kind of companies are making these expansions, and a myriad of other measurements we would take. We have, I guess, a starting point for what we think should be measured based on other programs we've seen. We got some good feedback at the Finance Committee that there were some other additional measures that would be important for the county board to have. So we're working on putting together more of a metrics that would measure the performance of the program that then we would report quarterly back to the county board's Finance Committee. So, in summarizing, I just think we view this as a creative, aggressive economic development tool that we don't have. Gives us one more, tool in the toolbox, so to speak, as we work on economic development. And if the county so chose to entrust us with this program, we would manage it, we would be good stewards with it, and we would use it aggressively to try and stimulate new economic development activity in the county.
Thank you.
I have a few.
There may be a few questions, so if you wouldn't mind, I'll have them addressed to you. Chairman?
I just want to make sure that, Mr. Battle, specifically that you address the compensation and what you're counting, what you count for the 50 employees. There's a wage floor. There's a average that you guys expect. If you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, in this instance, we followed some of the guidelines that we see the Wisconsin Department of Commerce utilize. There's an absolute floor, which is 150% of the federal minimum wage. So we wouldn't be able to provide any kind of incentive or assistance to companies that don't meet that minimum threshold. But that is really not where the target's set. We've taken a look at a series of demographic reports that talk about Kenosha County and its labor market. Today there are roughly 53 or 54,000 jobs in the Kenosha County area across all industries. If you took all of those jobs and took all of the salaries and compiled them and came up with an average wage, it would come out to be about a little north of $36,000 a year, or $17.48 an hour. So we took that number and said this is the mean or the average of all industries, all jobs in Kenosha County. The goal here is to improve the standard of living and raise income levels. So our target is to be above that average wage that is in the county today. And so that's kind of where we came up with those targets that we're setting on the program.
And then just one final point before I yield the floor. I just wanted to comment that we did have discussion as to who decides who gets this money, and really this goes to the model when the county board first set up these revolving loan funds. The finance committee, CABA's finance committee, which really reviews and approves all of their loans that are made. They have business people, business leaders, financial people that are making financial decisions, and they're used to evaluating forecasts and projections. One of the questions that was asked along the way is, well, how come Kenosha County is not deciding who's doing that? And the reason that they set it up that way is they wanted to take politics out of this money, and they wanted it to be independent of politics and based on a financial evaluation. So I thought that was critical that everybody understood that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in support of this resolution, but I want to also emphasize and underscore the importance that this is not a one-time single investment, at least from my perspective. Exhibit 1 says that the initial investment of $1 million is a commitment to consider a regular annual investment allocation. And I think this is an extremely important thing to consider, that it not be just a one-shot, one-time effort. This is going to take a considerable amount of time and a considerable amount of money. There are a lot of communities in this country and a lot of states who are spending a lot more than Wisconsin is, and they're showing good results. Here in Kenosha, our wage level is declining. The unemployment is between 10 and 11%. Factories have closed. Small businesses have closed. So the need here is for economic development, particularly in the city, is very, very great. And some of the jobs that people have that are unemployed, those jobs are not they don't exist anymore. So our recovery, I think, is going to be slower here than it is in other parts of the nation. I want to just mention, so I wanted to emphasize those facts so that we view this tonight as a beginning, not as an end, as the start of a partnership that will continue in the future, not just a one-time $1 million shot in the arm that we think we can, with that, change the whole economic landscape of this community. We can, if the commitment, financial commitment, is an annual commitment extending well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Zerban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to echo Supervisor Rose's comments. I do agree that this should be an annual or subject to review and be an annual investment that we make to help create new jobs. And I am in favor of it, and I don't want anybody to think I'm not, but I'd like to know or have it somewhere listed in the resolution. I know it says it's reporting to the Finance Committee, and the exhibit it says County Board / Finance Committee, but I'd like to see some kind of, followed up detail with reporting with respect to the positions that are created and the kind of economic impact it actually has had on the community before we approve another $1 million or whatever that future sum may be. And I'm not seeing it. I did hear Mr. Battle speak to the 150% of the minimum wage, which I believe that what was the number you used as
36,000.
that's not 150% of the minimum wage.
The
Oh, he didn't say-
1088 is 150% of the federal minimum
1088,
wage
which
today.
is not $36,000 a year. So there's some ambiguity here that I'm not comfortable with, and I'd like to see how we can maybe get some of that detail put into the resolution. With some,
If I could, and Mr. Battle, if you want to address it as well, that was alluded to by Finance Chairman Clark. In terms of the metrics information that will be put together in conjunction with CABA and the discussion of the Finance Committee, one of the aspects that I asked for, I think will be included is what is the impact back to the community, not just what number of jobs are you creating, making sure we meet that threshold, what the demographics of the individuals they're hiring are, but what's the benefit back to the community? Are we talking about what's the multiplier in terms of what that group brings back to Kenosha County in terms of expenditure of the salary dollars that they're getting? So I think what you're asking for, Supervisor Zerban, will be vetted out here. I will urge that going forward, the report to the Finance Committee, which is quarterly at a minimum, also on some level be brought back to the County Board, not just through the Finance Committee Chairman, but also through CABA. I think I'd like to see CABA here in front of the County Board a little bit more often than you have been, through no fault of your own. Certainly in this case, I think it requires that additional step. So I believe what you're asking for will be part of the discussion and part of that metrics that's put together and that information we brought forward.
okay.
Anything else?
Nope, thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say I agree very strongly with Supervisor Rosen-Zerban, and to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the Chair of the Finance Committee and those members. I did address some questions I had about the reporting of CABA and some of that demographic information, and it was you all that gave that concern legs strong enough to run, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark.
I just wanted to comment on Supervisor Zerban, his point. I believe that the goal of high impact here is that the average number of the average wage for the jobs is going to be that $17 number. It's 50%, or it's the state average. And when they get to counting what determines high impact, they cannot count for that 50 job count. They can't count any of those jobs that are below 1088 that they have in their shop. So, and Mr. Battle can correct me if I'm wrong, we had discussion on that Finance Committee. the objective here is that we're creating jobs that are at the county average, which is that $36,000 number roughly.
That is the intent. The 1088 is meant to be a hard floor, and I guess what it was inserted there would be to prevent a situation where perhaps we have a company that the project results in 51 new jobs, and there are 10 executive level positions that may be six-figure salaries and 45 $8 an hour jobs doing fairly menial tasks. You could average those out, and they could probably exceed the 1088 average and maybe even get close to the 1748 average, but it isn't doing what we intended it to do, which was create a lot of good paying jobs. So we inserted the 1088, which is the benchmark the state uses as its floor. We thought that was reasonable or valid, but that's clearly not the aim. The aim is much higher, but I think that does give a little flexibility. If tomorrow a company showed up and they had 150 jobs and their average wage ended up being $16.50, and everybody that signed up was in that range, I think we'd want the flexibility to do that. So I think the intent of this, first time out of the gate doing this program, it's a new effort. We want to come back to you next year, show great results, show you our matrix, show the impact we've had, and ask for more money. So we're clearly setting the bar pretty high, but we also want to build in a little flexibility. If we write the rules so hard and fast, we could limit the chance to take advantage of some good projects that maybe are right at that threshold that we're shooting for. So I think that was the intent, to set a hard floor, but set the aim a little bit higher, with the idea that we'd be coming back to you on a regular basis, reporting our results, showing you the impact, and potentially asking for future investments. So I hope that covered it.
Thank you.
Just one other point as well. And Supervisor Bond, I'll get to you. Just one other point to piggyback that came out of the committee, came out of the discussion, is we have a resolution that has the ability to be adjusted, modified, looked at going forward. Ordinarily, I wouldn't be comfortable in a scenario like that, where I would certainly want to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. We're dealing with an organization in CABA who has had a long history with Kenosha County, a long history in administering a significant amount of money through their revolving loan fund. The success rate is incredible, and that gives me a certain level of comfort. I think it should give the board a certain level of comfort. Not to say we don't continue to diligently pay attention to what we're doing. The reporting that comes back, we have to understand that if it needs to be addressed and the resolution needs to be looked at, we should do it. But I have great confidence in CABA, certainly great confidence in Mr. Battle and all he's done in his tenure here in Kenosha County. And I think we have the basics with a known entity, a program that's been successful, and I think that we should keep that in mind as we continue to discuss the resolution. Supervisor Zerbon.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, off the subject for a little bit, thank Mr. Battle for being here tonight, his efforts on behalf of CABA. I can tell you a friend of mine is now relocating his company here to Kenosha County, and in no small part due to Mr. Battle's efforts, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, and we welcome the new company. Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Mr. Battle, as I read through this document here, Todd, it appears as though it's basically Kenosha County CABA involvement. Is that correct? Kenosha County and CABA exclusively?
The
$1 million?
The funding?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other similar arrangements either in place or proposed with other governmental agencies and CABA, or is this the only high impact of its type? I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I'm just trying to figure out, are we the only ones doing this, or are other parties interested in this type of thing as well?
The model that we're looking at here, some of it was based on a similar program that's being ramped up in Washington County. But in terms of our area, I think, specifically Kenosha County, we administer revolving loan fund programs on your behalf, on the Village of Pleasant Prairie's behalf, on the City of Kenosha's behalf. This is a new initiative, but there are other regions around the state and around the country that have different types of economic development tools. It's very competitive. Lots of communities are trying to be creative. I think this is a good step for us that gives us a tool that most other communities do not have.
But as it stands now, we have nothing in terms of, say, City of Kenosha, Pleasant Prairie, whatever, doing anything similar to this. This is kind of a first-of-the-kind thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of the high impact fund, yes.
All right, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Overman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak in support of this resolution. I think it was very well put together, comprehensive, and you know, it didn't require a lot to understand what we were after here when we were talking during budget time. I've been a fan of CABA since I was on the village board in Twin Lakes and saw early on what CABA's done for Kenosha County. And the biggest assurance that I have is in the last page of this document when we talk about the administration of it. And the biggest thing is that they're going to manage this as they do the revolving loan fund program. And to have someone with CABA's knowledge and knowing how they've run this revolving loan fund, if anyone has ever seen the people on their board, success stories, they would know that this money is in very good hands. If you read the evaluation and reporting that will be done, I think we're going to see successes from the beginning here, so I would urge everyone's support on this.
Thank you. Any other supervisor comments? Seeing none, all those, this answers my question. Roll call requested. If you're in favor of Resolution 93, P and plus, opposed, P and minus. Motion carries 28-0. I would say a very hearty thank you to Mr. Battle. I appreciate all that you do. I want to recognize Supervisor Clark, Mr. Gertzen, who's here, Finance Director, Administration, County Executive, Jim Cruiser. It's amazing what can be accomplished in a relatively short train ride to and from Chicago. I think the conversation started on the way down, and by the time we got back, Dave had already had an idea where the funding could come from. The county executive was behind it. The finance chairman undoubtedly made a call or pulled something up on his BlackBerry and scheduled a meeting. And before you today, before the end of January, we have this fund in place so that everyone is aware the funding will be transferred to CABA immediately. And we expect Mr. Battle to get to work, and we'll schedule you for the next county board meeting with a report on 50 new jobs, I trust.
Thank you for the vote of confidence. We will be good stewards of this, and we will use it aggressively to help stimulate activity here. Thank you.
Appreciate all the input. Clerk.
Resolution 94 from Highway and Parks regarding Kenosha County Public Snowmobile Trail. Elverman, yes. Noble, yes. O'Day, yes. Gale Gintz, yes. Underhill, yes.
Supervisor Overman.
Move Resolution 94, Mr. Chairman.
Resolution 94 moved by Supervisor Overman, seconded by Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Overman.
Mr. Chairman and fellow supervisors, Resolution 94 is something that comes before us each year. We're a conduit for funds. The funds come from fees and registration from the snowmobilers that use the state of Wisconsin trails. What this money does is go back through us to the snowmobile groups that take care of those trails. Every year it's a little bit different amount. This year it's $19,000 some dollars, right around $19,000. So we do the application of the state gives us the money, we allocate it to our snowmobile groups in Kenosha County. I urge your approval.
Anyone on the question? Seeing no lights, all those in favor of Resolution 94 signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Resolution 95 from Highway and Parks, a resolution to repair the County Trunk Highway KR Rail Highway crossing with the tracks of the Canadian Pacific Railway in the town of Summers. Elverman, yes. Noble, yes. O'Day, yes. Gale Gintz, yes. Underhill, yes.
Supervisor Overman.
Move Resolution 95.
Resolution 95 moved by Supervisor Overman, seconded by Supervisor Gale Gintz. Supervisor Overman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution 95 is a resolution that basically gives notice to the Canadian Pacific Railway that we are unhappy with the conditions of one of the railroad crossings. That one is on County Trunk KR. They are responsible for the railroad crossing and 4 feet on either side of the outside rails to keep them in good condition and repair for highway travel. Our Highway Commissioner, Mr. Sipsma, has deemed them not in good condition, and what this resolution does, it's received by them, and a notice needs to be given to the Railroad Commissioner. The Railroad Commissioner then enforces this work to be done, but this is the first step to that, so I would ask for your approval.
Thank you. Anyone on the question? I have one question. If memory serves, we have gone through this process before this route with other rail crossings, and their response was to suggest we close the road. I'm making the assumption that Highway KR is significant enough that we're going to see some action to repair this?
Significant enough, and also the Commissioner went in our favor on those where they told us to close the road.
I recall that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seeing the lights, all those in favor of Resolution 95 signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We are going to, unless there's objection, I'm going to have the clerk read 96 through 106, which are all appointments from the Human Services Committee. If there's reason for someone to have one separated, let me know. Otherwise, we'll read them all together and make one motion. Clerk.
Resolution 96 from Human Service Committee, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Richard Lenz to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 97, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Ione Kramer to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 98, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Jamie Laurent to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 99, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Carol Schaffel to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 100, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Lisa Thompson to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 101, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Phyllis Rosinski to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 102, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Gary Preston to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 103, a resolution to approve the reappointment of Paulette Kissy to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 104, a resolution to approve the appointment of June Sinkfield to the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center Board. 105, a resolution to approve the appointment of Ruth Fangmeyer to the Kenosha County Commission on Aging. 106, a resolution to approve the appointment of Julie Friedman to the Kenosha County Commission on Aging, submitted by the Human Service Committee. Rose, yes. Jeff Gentz, yes. Celebrity, yes. Gable, yes. Arrington, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
All right, thank you, and I would move the appointments as read in resolutions numbers 96 through 106.
Motion by Supervisor Rose to move Resolution 96 through 106, seconded by Supervisor Jeff Gentz. Supervisor Rose.
These appointments and reappointments have all been reviewed by the Human Services Committee. The biographical sketches have been attached to each resolution, and all of the people who have been reappointed are all in good standing in the sense that they have contributed to the committee and participated in most, if not all, of the meetings. The new appointments, which are mentioned, are also seem to be very well qualified individuals as set forth in their biographical sketches, as well as their appearance before the committee. We would urge your consideration and support for the nominees.
Thank you. Anyone on Resolution 95 through 106? Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 107 from Judiciary and Law Committee, a resolution to approve the appointment of Thomas Radmer to serve on the Civil Service Commission. Judiciary and Law, Michael, yes. Haas, yes. Ronald Johnson, yes. Singer, yes. Ron Frederick, yes.
Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Resolution 107.
Resolution 107 moved by Supervisor Michael, seconded by Haas. Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is actually a reappointment for this individual, Thomas Radmer. I did have Donna Debris, our secretary, check on his attendance. I believe he made over 90% of the meetings. I urge your support on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any lights? Any discussion on Resolution 107? Seeing the lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Communication 13 from George E. Melcher regarding future rezoning.
Refer to land use.
Claims 24, Shelley Long, defective process service by the Sheriff's Department.
Refer Refer to Corporation Council.
Supervisor comment, Supervisor Hallman, foreclosures, house explosion, and Martin Luther King's birthday.
Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be as brief as possible. On the foreclosure front, I have asked our two county judges that are dealing with foreclosures, Judge Wilk and Judge Schrader, if it would be possible for them to have our foreclosure mediation program for our county set up by the end of the month. They didn't say yes or no, but they did say that they were working with Racine County and that there is a conference call with Judge Constantine down in Racine County to begin figuring out how they're going to do that. As some of you probably, I'm sure, have heard, last week a house exploded in the heart of my district. There's no word as to why, but I have spoken with members of the Red Cross, both workers and volunteers, about trying to identify the long-term needs. The thing that seemed to surface from those conversations was an emphasis on mental health, particularly PTSD. There are residents of the area who are quite shaken up still, and at some point in the near future I will hold a community meeting in the district to further assess those needs of those residents, and I'll keep you all informed about that. Lastly, I've always had a hard time with MLK Day, with the birthday, with the celebration. And as I've gotten older, I've grown to understand the meaning. And it would seem with two wars and the movement of Chrysler to Mexico and mass unemployment and banks collapsing like dominoes and birds falling from the sky and the shooting of a member of Congress and her staff and constituents, that perhaps before we adjourn for the evening, just to reflect and hear some of the words from perhaps what is one of America's perhaps most notable pastors and civil rights icons. So I'll read a few of his words from his speech on April 4th in 1967 at the Riverside Church in New York City. It was titled "Clergy and Laity Concerned About Vietnam." Pastor and Dr. King writes and says, "A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho Road must be transformed, so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say, this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of Latin America and say, this is not just. The Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling our differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into veins of people normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of men does not remain at the flood. It ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residue of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. There is an invisible book of life that faithfully records our vigilance or our neglect. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. We still have a choice today, nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hellman. I appreciate your comments and your convictions. Anyone else? Nope, there isn't anyone else. Clerk.
Approval of the January 4th, 2011 minutes by Supervisor Brunig.
Supervisor Bruning.
Chairman, I would approve the minutes of January 4th, 2011 as presented.
Supervisor Clark, you had a comment?
I just have one brief correction. In the supervisor comments, their property taxes went up. So they just changed the word went to went.
Trust there will be no objections to that. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Motion made by Supervisor Bruning, seconded by Supervisor Clark as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn by Supervisor Hallman, second by Supervisor Michael. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? We are adjourned.